At around 10:30 p.m. on the 1st of January 2003, relatives of 19-year-old Nikia Chanel Kilpatrick visited her apartment in the Spanish Oaks neighborhood of Jacksonville, Florida. They were worried because no one in the family had heard from her over the holiday period. When they arrived at the apartment block, they saw Nikia's 2-year-old son banging on the window. Inside the apartment, there was a putrid smell, and her younger son, who was just 11 months old, was crawling about on the floor. Nikia's decomposing body was found in the bedroom. She had been tied up and there was a cord around her neck. She had been strangled and sexually abused. The medical examiner found that she had been killed up to 48 hours before her body had been discovered. The children had survived by eating dried food from the kitchen. They were malnourished and traumatized by being confined with their dead mother. Worse, Nikia had been 6 months pregnant at the time of her death. While the police found some vital physical evidence at the crime scene, nothing immediately pointed to a suspect. However, there were some clues. The perpetrator clearly was organized. It was surmised that this was not his first murder. Indeed, less than 2 weeks before, on the 19th of December 2002, the remains of 18-year-old Nicole L. Williams had been found in a ditch. They were wrapped in a light blue blanket from a Jacksonville hotel, where it was thought she had been murdered. Like Nikia, she had been bound and strangled. On the 10th of January, 20-year-old nursing assistant Shawanda Denise McAllister was found dead in her Jacksonville apartment. Again, she had been bound and sexually abused, and she had a cord around her neck. She was also pregnant at the time of her death. Investigators drew the obvious parallel that her death was linked to those of Nikia Kilpatrick and Nicole Williams. DNA taken from the bodies showed that the same killer was responsible. Plainly, a serial killer was at work, and he would soon be known as the Jacksonville Strangler. The killer did not stop there. On the 5th of February, construction workers found the body of 17-year-old Giovanna Terrica Jefferson in a ditch on a vacant lot. She had been missing since the 20th of January 2003. When the police arrived, they also found the remains of 19-year-old mother of two, Sarita Ann Cohen, just 6 feet from Giovanna's. She had been missing since the 4th of February. Again, they had been tied up and sexually abused before they were strangled. An identical slipknot was used in each case, and at last there was a vital clue to the identity of the killer. Both women had been seen with a cab driver named Paul Durousseau before they disappeared. Born on the 11th of August 1970 in Beaumont, Texas, Durousseau had a police record dating back to December 1991 when he was arrested in California for carrying a concealed handgun. He had been living with his mother's family in Los Angeles since his parents split. After graduating from high school, 19-year-old Durousseau found himself working as a security guard. After a second offense in January 1992, he joined the U.S. Army and was posted to Germany, where the authorities subsequently suspect he killed several women. While stationed there, he met and fell in love with a 21-year-old servicewoman named Natoka, who he had met in a nightclub. They married in Las Vegas, Nevada in 1995. Stationed at Fort Benning, Georgia. 2 years later, Durousseau was arrested and charged with kidnap and rape, but was acquitted on all charges. A month later, the naked body of a 26-year-old woman named Tracy Habersham was found in a ditch. She had been raped and strangled with a cord. At that time, Durousseau was not a suspect. Later, though, DNA would tie him to the case, and he confessed. Durousseau was then found in possession of stolen goods. Court-martialed in January 1999, he was dishonorably discharged from the army. Although this put a strain on his marriage, Durousseau and his wife moved to Jacksonville, her hometown, where they raised 2 daughters. But he had a problem holding down a job and was described by acquaintances as a lewd womanizer. It was said that he often made sexually suggestive comments to local women and tried to seduce young girls in the neighborhood. This did not go down well with acquaintances. Natoka was well liked, while Durousseau was seen as something of a wastrel. As well as bringing up the children, she worked and went to school. In August 1999, she went to the police after he slapped her and grabbed her around the neck in an argument about finances. They told her how to get a restraining order. She did not take their advice until the following year, when he became angry and violent after she told him she was planning to file for divorce. "I am afraid it will escalate," she wrote in the petition. However, the restraining order was not issued after Natosa dropped the matter, though she sought another injunction 12 months later, after he had put his hands around her neck and threatened to kill her. In August 2001, he was jailed for 6 weeks for physically abusing his wife after serving a month with 2 years probation for the rape of a Jacksonville woman, an extraordinarily light sentence. Meanwhile, he had been arrested for trespassing on private property, and in April 2001 he was charged with burglary, but later acquitted. Despite a lengthening criminal record, he found temporary work as a school bus driver and an animal control worker, aka a dog catcher. In January 2003, he began driving for Gator City Taxi, a Jacksonville cab company. This brought him into the company of many women, including Giovanna Jefferson and Sarita Cohen. 17-year-old Giovanna Jefferson was last seen getting into a taxi driven by a man known as D. When she did not return home, her aunt called her cell phone. It was answered by a man who identified himself as the cab driver, who said she would be home soon. When she did not return, Giovanna's mother went to Gator City Taxi, where she was told that D was Paul Durousseau. By then, Durousseau and his wife had split after 8.5 years of marriage. In January 2003, Natoka had moved into a new house with her daughters. While Durousseau continued living in the family home, he visited often. He was there when he was arrested for a violation of his probation for the 2001 rape case. While he was in Duval County Jail, the police built a case against him, matching his DNA to samples found on the victims. Other forensic evidence linked him to the crime scenes. They also had cell phone data and the cab company's records. It was then that Durousseau became known as the killer Cabbie. The evidence was overwhelming. As well as the DNA, jewelry belonging to Giovanna and Sarita was found in his car. Cell phone records showed that the 2 girls had called him before they disappeared. Fibers from the blanket Nicole Williams was wrapped in were found in his home, and a surveillance tape from an ATM Shawanda McAllister had withdrawn money from on the day she died showed Durousseau in the background. On the 17th of June 2003, Paul Durousseau was charged with 5 counts of first-degree murder for the deaths of Nikia Kilpatrick, Shawanda McAllister, Nicole Williams, Giovanna Jefferson, and Sarita Cohen. He also faced 2 counts of child abuse against Nikia's son, who he left alone in the apartment for 2 days with the decomposing remains of their mother. Charges for the murder of Tracy Habersham followed. She was last seen alive in September 1997 at a party in the NCO Club at Fort Benning while he was stationed there. Her naked body was found a couple of days later in a ditch in nearby Columbus, Georgia. She had been strangled. Again, matching DNA linked him to the murder. More followed. On the 26th of August 2003, he was charged with the 1999 murder of 24-year-old mother of 3, Tyresa Mack. She had been strangled in her East Side apartment in Jacksonville. DNA samples matched, and he had been seen leaving her apartment carrying a television. A Florida grand jury indicted him on 5 counts of first-degree murder and 2 counts of child abuse for leaving Nikia Kilpatrick's children alone with their dead mother's body. The indictment was necessary for the state attorney to seek the death penalty. However, he did not pursue the deaths of the fetuses some of the victims were carrying that died along with their mothers. In the end, Durousseau only went on trial for the murder of Tyresa Mack. The other murder charges were dropped, though they could be reinstated if he was not executed. Meanwhile, the parents of 3 of the victims sued Gator City Taxi for failing in their duty to carry out adequate background checks on Durousseau before hiring him. At the trial, Durousseau spent about 90 minutes on the stand, answering questions about his relationships with the dead women. He admitted having sex with Tyresa Mack, Nikia Kilpatrick, and Shawanda McAllister before their deaths, but insisted he wasn't the one who killed them. He admitted lying to detectives when he initially denied knowing any of them. He said he met Mack in April 1999 and that they had met often for 3 months. The last time he saw her was on the 26th of July, the day she was killed, and she was alive when he left her apartment. When he heard about her death, he thought she'd been shot. He did not contact police as he didn't have any fresh information to give them. On the 13th of December 2007, Paul Durousseau was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to death by lethal injection. Mack's sister, Latasha Bell, said, "He's getting what he deserves. I know it won't bring my sister back, but I do have closure, me and my family." But before the sentence could be carried out, state law had been changed to require a unanimous verdict, including in some cases retroactively, for the death penalty to be carried out. In Durousseau's trial, the jury had only found for the death penalty by a majority of 10 to 2. The High Court rejected arguments for a new trial. However, a new jury was constituted for a fresh sentencing hearing. Again, it returned a majority of 10 to 2. On the 10th of December 2021, after over 10 years on death row, Durousseau was sentenced to life imprisonment without possibility of parole.